On stage, Ricky Skaggs always appears with his gentle silver hair, a warm smile, and the sound of a mandolin that has captivated generations of audiences. But few people know that the man standing there was once turned away by Nashville and later had to fight his way through heart surgeries that nearly took his life. And now, at the age of 71, Ricky Skaggs is facing the very thing he has feared all his life. The wife who has supported him, stood beside him, and rescued him from the darkness for more than 40 years. Sharon White has suddenly received devastating news from the doctor. For the first time, Ricky does not know how much longer he will be able to hold the hand of the woman who has walked with him through an entire lifetime. So what exactly has happened? And just how brutal is the silent battle that the Skaggs family is going through? Before we begin this heartbreaking story, please leave a comment, a prayer, a word of encouragement for Ricky and Sharon during the most difficult moment of their lives. To understand the invisible thread that bound Ricky Skaggs and Sharon White together, we have to return to the late 1970s, a time when American country music was turning between old and new, between Appalachian tradition and the modern influences quietly seeping into every corner of the stage. At that time, Ricky was not just a young talent. He stepped onto the stage as if carrying the very breath of Kentucky with him. The mandolin had been his childhood companion, its sound, his heartbeat, and every melody he played felt as though he were speaking on behalf of the Appalachian hills that had raised him. He did not try to become an icon, he simply continued the legacy Bill Monroe had left behind with the natural ease and dedication of someone who knew exactly where he belonged in music. On the other side of that journey, Sharon grew up in a softer world, yet no less steadfast. For her, music was family, it was faith, it was a home of peace and stability. As the lead singer of the Whites, Sharon carried within her the strength of gentleness. They met in a setting without fireworks or flashy lights, only real instruments, real halls, where artists saw one another with respect rather than by the name printed on a poster. Ricky did not look at Sharon as a star. He saw her as a melody his heart had been searching for all along. Sharon felt the same. She listened to Ricky play and sensed the sincerity radiating from every beat. From that respect, a quiet love was planted. It did not explode or flare up overnight. It grew the way all things that are right tend to grow, slowly, steadily, and as if it had always been meant to be. In August 1981, they were married like two final puzzle pieces, finally finding their proper place after a long journey. Their happiness did not stand on stage lights or awards, but on the choice each of them made to lift up the other on stage and in the quietest moments of life. That harmony eventually became music. When they recorded Love Can't Ever Get Better Than This in 1987, audiences did not just hear technique or chemistry. They heard a love story that was alive, breathing, and still being written every day. The song won a CMA award, but for Ricky and Sharon, the most precious thing was what Ricky once whispered to his wife. "I wasn't looking for love in this life, but I knew I had found it the moment I heard you sing." Perhaps that is why their love still stands firm today, because it was built on music, on faith, and on things that never needed stage lights to shine. Their love was beautiful and peaceful, yet life is never a straight line painted in pink. In the summer of 2020, while the entire world was sinking into the frightening stillness of a global pandemic, a massive storm quietly descended upon the family of this country music legend. It began with signs that seemed harmless. Ricky, then 66 years old, felt unusual tightness in his chest. A strong Southern man accustomed to grueling tour schedules, he intended to ignore it. But Sharon's instinct, the instinct of a wife who had stood beside him for 4 decades, spoke up. She insisted that he undergo a full medical examination. The results of the coronary angiogram struck the entire family like a fatal blow. Doctors discovered that Ricky was suffering from extremely severe coronary artery blockage. Not one, not two, but all 4 of his major arteries were critically obstructed. The condition was so dire that his attending physician reportedly exclaimed that the fact Ricky Skaggs was still alive, that he had not suffered a catastrophic stroke right on stage during previous tours, was nothing short of a miracle that medicine could hardly explain. Later, Ricky recalled, "That doctor looked at me as if he had just witnessed something beyond his own expertise and said that my heart had endured longer than anyone had any right to expect. And there was no time to hesitate. An emergency quadruple bypass surgery was immediately scheduled. It was a life-and-death operation, one in which the patient's chest must be opened and the heart temporarily stopped so that doctors can reconstruct the flow of life itself." In those darkest hours, Sharon White revealed the extraordinary strength of a woman standing behind a legend. Amid strict hospital lockdowns due to COVID-19, she was not allowed to remain at her husband's bedside. The fear of knowing that her life partner lay on the operating table, facing the blade of death without even the comfort of her hand to hold, would have been enough to break anyone. But instead of collapsing, Sharon transformed her fear into the power of faith. She mobilized an army of prayer from family members, friends in the Nashville music community, to fans around the world. She became the steady anchor, holding the spirit of the entire family together so it would not be torn apart under the crushing weight of terror. A miracle appeared once again. The major surgery was a complete success. The recovery that followed was a long and painful road, demanding extraordinary patience. And throughout that entire journey, Sharon remained by Ricky's side, caring for him meal by meal, step by unsteady step as he took his first tentative walks after leaving his hospital bed. Months after the ordeal, when he finally reappeared in public, Ricky Skaggs looked thinner and more worn, yet his eyes shone with a light of boundless gratitude. In a tearful interview, he said, "God gave me not only a new heart physically, but a new heart spiritually, and I owe Sharon my life. Without her determination, and without the unconditional love she gave me during my darkest days, I would not be standing here today." The crisis of 2020 was not an ending, but a rebirth. It tested their marriage in fire and proved that the vow in sickness and in health they had spoken 40 years earlier had never faded. On the other side of that devotion, Ricky Skaggs has always been a steady shoulder for Sharon in her most exhausting moments. When the woman of his life stepped away from the stage lights, her heart still heavy with the weight of performance, Ricky was there not only as a husband, but as a companion who knew how to listen and how to remain silent when words became unnecessary. During the quiet pauses after concerts, when night settled in and the music no longer echoed, he would place his hand gently on her back, a reminder without words that no matter how fierce the storm, they would never walk through it alone. For more than 4 decades, they have journeyed side by side, both on stage and in everyday life, turning the years they shared into music, from the hit "Love Can't Ever Get Better Than This" to the days they carefully chose songs together for the album "Hearts Like Ours," as if compiling a diary of hearts that had experienced and shared so much. And in peaceful mornings, when sunlight filtered through the living room curtains where they had once embraced and talked after a show, Ricky would softly tell Sharon that their love did not live only in melodies, it lived in patience, in the choice to stay whenever one of them grew weary. That is why the songs they wrote together never lost the resonance of steadfast loyalty. Throughout their marriage, faith has always been present, like a quiet but enduring current, flowing through every trial, every joyful season, every time they held hands before stepping out from behind the curtain. For Ricky and Sharon, faith was not something they reached for in desperation. It was the ground they stood on each day. It was there in the mornings when they prayed together before walking onto the stage, in the evenings when they placed their hands on one another and gave thanks for another day of life, in the moments when their hearts seemed to fall into an abyss, only to be pulled back by something greater than themselves. Perhaps that is why their marriage of more than 40 years has never rested solely on love. It has been anchored by belief. The belief that God placed them beside each other for a reason. The belief that every trial exists to remind them that love refined by patience will never collapse. and the belief that no matter how life may shake, they will always have a place to lean. A God who has walked with these two artists from their youth until now. That faith, quiet yet unwavering, has not only preserved their love, it has guided the very melodies they bring into the world. And in every note that Ricky Skaggs and Sharon White lift into the air, people hear not only the echo of Appalachia, but also the whisper of a faith that has accompanied them all their lives. And to understand why Ricky Skaggs possesses such enduring faith, we must travel far back to the days when he was just a boy among the hills of Kentucky. Ricky Skaggs' childhood began in Cordell, Kentucky, a stretch of Appalachian hills where the sound of instruments and the scent of old wood blended together like the breath of the earth itself. He was born in 1954 into a poor but music-filled family where happiness was not measured in money, but in evenings gathered together listening to his parents sing hymns beneath the dim glow of a yellow lamp. His father, Hobart Skaggs, was not a famous musician, but he carried a gift that Ricky would hold on to for life. The ability to see something extraordinary in a little boy barely big enough to hold a mandolin. Hobart placed the instrument into Ricky's hands when he was only 3 years old, and from that moment on, music was no longer something outside of him, it became his heartbeat. His father taught him every chord, every rhythm, with the sternness of a man who understood that talent is only a seed. For it to grow requires both discipline and love. Whenever Ricky wanted to give up, Hobart would say just one sentence: "You have to play from the heart." That sentence followed him throughout his life, becoming a compass for every piece of music he would later create. While other children his age played with wooden carts in the yard, Ricky sat in the living room, his tiny legs dangling above the floor, cradling a mandolin that seemed larger than the world, waiting for him to discover it. His difference did not lie in rebellion, but in a quiet light, a child who needed no reminder that he belonged to music the way a fish belongs to water. When Ricky was 6, destiny stepped into his life. His father took him to see Bill Monroe perform. In what seemed like an ordinary moment, Bill Monroe invited the red-haired boy onto the stage. Ricky stood there, small beneath the blinding lights, but when his mandolin rang out, the entire hall fell silent. The audience did not see a cute child performing. They saw an artist, even though he was only 6 years old. Not long after, Ricky appeared on the Flat and Scruggs show, something almost no child at that time could achieve. The chair he sat on during the television broadcast was too tall for his small legs, yet the sound of his mandolin was as steady as if it belonged on the grandest stages in the world. While his peers waited for the school bell to ring, Ricky spent his childhood on vehicles traveling across the American South. He played music in revival churches, places where melodies rose to soothe the soul, performed at fairs, toured with adults, learned how to harmonize, how to lead a band, how to listen to the breathing of a stage. His childhood had no rebellious phases, no idle summers. Instead, there were nights when he fell asleep beside his instrument case, mornings when he woke to the sound of Appalachian birds and sunlight streaming through a truck window. And throughout that journey, Hobart stood behind him, teacher, friend, and guardian of the path Ricky walked. He did not only teach his son how to play an instrument, he taught him how to be an artist, serious, humble, and always mindful that every person walking into a theater carries something in their heart that needs healing. That is why, in 1996, when Hobart passed away, Ricky nearly collapsed. The news reached him through a brief phone call that tore through a quiet afternoon in Nashville. Ricky was in the middle of a recording session, his hand still resting on the strings, when a family member called, their voice trembling as if trying to hold back the unholdable. In that instant, it felt as though the world around him had been stripped of sound. The studio, once filled with music, became hollow and cold. Ricky stood frozen, his eyes wide in disbelief. The father who had taught him his first rhythm, his first chord, the first breath of music, was gone without waiting for one more goodbye. He felt himself return to childhood, once again a tiny boy among the Kentucky hills, learning for the first time what true loss meant. In a choked-up interview, he said, "The day my father died, I lost my teacher, my friend, and the person who believed in me the most. It was not merely the pain of losing a loved one. It was the feeling that the ground beneath his feet had cracked open because the man who had placed the first mandolin in his hands was no longer there to hear him play." Yet that pain did not cause Ricky to lose his way. It settled into the songs he wrote, blended into every bluegrass melody he carried across America. From the boy in Cordell to the star of the country bluegrass stage, Ricky's journey has never strayed far from where it began. The deep green Appalachian hills, a small living room glowing with yellow light, and a father's hand resting lightly yet firmly on his son's shoulder. Because in the end, every legend begins with something very simple, a little boy holding a mandolin, larger than his life, playing with all his heart. As the 1970s arrived, at just 17 or 18 years old, Ricky left Cordell and Kentucky itself, heading toward Nashville, where country dreams could either shatter or bloom after a single performance. There, everyone is talented, everyone is hungry, and everyone wants a place under the lights of the Grand Ole Opry. But Ricky didn't go there just to see what happens. He arrived with the mindset that he had to live by music or not live at all. In a short time, he joined the Country Gentlemen, one of the biggest bluegrass groups, and then J.D., Crow, and the New South, a band that completely changed the way bluegrass was felt. There, Ricky learned what Appalachia could not fully teach him: how to blend tradition with a modern pulse, how to make the mandolin not only the sound of the mountains, but also the voice of the times. In those years, Ricky grew up faster than his age. He learned how to build harmonies, how to hold the soul of a band, how to let the mandolin lead without overpowering, how to keep bluegrass alive in a Nashville that was changing day by day. Those were years when he had no second to hesitate. Nashville had no room for people who wavered. Every night on stage was a small battle. Every recording was a wager with life. Then 1981 arrived, bringing an unexpected milestone: his first solo album, Waitin' for the Sun to Shine. Ricky was not the face Nashville was betting on at the time, but the album delivered a shock that made the entire industry turn its head. 1 hits, the album topping the country charts, and most importantly, a clear proof that an artist loyal to traditional sound could still win big. Nashville had to admit that, even those who had dismissed him as a purely Appalachian artist who could never break through. But the bright light of success always comes with its shadow. The schedule became relentless, like gusts of wind that never stopped slamming into him. The record label began to make demands: more hits, a more sellable image, more appearances, more of everything. The press wanted bigger stories. The audience wanted nights that burned hotter than the one before. And in the middle of all those expectations, Ricky began to face what even the most gifted artists fear: burnout. He once admitted, "I was exhausted. There were times I didn't even recognize who I was anymore." That was not complaining. It was the confession of someone who had set his heart on fire for the stage for too long and forgotten that a heart also needs time to heal. And the most painful truth is this: when a career reaches its peak, it becomes frighteningly easy to lose yourself. By the late 1980s, Nashville shifted again, but this time in a direction Ricky no longer recognized. Country started to become pop. Synthesizers, drum machines, electronic sounds blanketing the radio. Acoustic songs, mandolins, fiddles, the very things he saw as the roots of Appalachia were labeled outdated. Studios switched to new technology. Labels wanted everything to be more mainstream. And traditional artists like Ricky were pushed into a choice: chase the trend or accept being left behind. Ricky chose what his heart told him, what his father had taught him when he was a 3-year-old boy in Cordell: never play what you don't believe in. He refused to change his style, refused to chase pop country, refused to let the mandolin be drowned out by electronic sound. He walked against the wind, holding onto acoustic, holding onto the fiddle, holding onto the Appalachian breath in every song. It was a brave decision, but it was also a lonely one. And Nashville answered that steadfastness with the cold stare of an industry that waits for no one. The press pinned the label old-fashioned artist on him, while record companies kept turning up the pressure, bluntly saying that if Ricky didn't change, he would remove himself from the game. Stages that once lit up with his name began to invite him less. Seats that had once been his familiar audience now turned toward younger faces, toward the electronic sound the era was craving. In that current, Ricky felt stranded between two worlds. An old Nashville, raw, simple, rich with country breath that he had carried from childhood, and a new Nashville, glossy and moving so fast he could no longer see himself in it. On one side was the Appalachian legacy he swore he would never betray. On the other was a city transforming every day, demanding artists adapt or be left behind. And Ricky stood right in the middle, holding on to only one certainty. He would not trade away the soul of his music, even if it meant standing alone on the old road. But perhaps those years were what truly forged Ricky Skaggs' backbone, the backbone of a man who would rather stand alone than stand in the wrong place. He didn't blame Nashville. He simply returned quietly to the music that had raised him from the beginning. Appalachia, bluegrass, mandolin, the wailing fiddle that carried the memory of summers on the Kentucky hills. He said music must have a soul, and that soul cannot be bent just to keep up with trends. And for that very reason, in 1990, he decided to leave the mainstream and return to bluegrass roots. He walked away from major labels, turned down glossy contracts, refused even the convenience of the electronic sound that ruled the radio. Nashville thought he was stepping out of the game, but in Ricky's heart, he knew he was simply returning to the road he was born to keep walking. In a time of fierce market turbulence, Ricky chose a path only artists with true character dare to choose. He carved his own way. In 1997, he founded Skaggs Family Records, an independent label run by his own hand. There were no boardrooms demanding he make it radio-friendly, no calls from executives telling him to change his image. There was only pure music, acoustic sound, mandolin steeped in mountain air, a fiddle crying like Appalachian wind, and Ricky's heart beating in the same rhythm it had known since childhood. And it was in that turning point that Kentucky Thunder was born. No fanfare, no grand announcement. The band took shape through simple jam sessions in the studio, where Ricky found people whose hearts beat in time with his. They were musicians who carried Appalachian sound in every finger. Fiddle, banjo, mandolin, upright bass. Together, they created music so sharp and pure that listeners could almost feel the mountain breeze inside it. Early recordings like Get Up John or Shady Grove hit with an energy that forced Nashville to look again. Bluegrass had not fallen back. It had only been waiting to be played the right way. Kentucky Thunder immediately became a pillar in Ricky's new journey. They didn't just back him up. They helped him restore the identity the market had once tried to blur. Every performance felt like a declaration. Tradition still has power, as long as it is lifted up from a real heart. With Kentucky Thunder, Ricky didn't just return to the stage, he returned to himself. Their music didn't need to chase trends. It stood firm on values time cannot shake. As the 21st century began, the album Big Mon, The Songs of Bill Monroe 2000, landed like a powerful statement. Ricky was back at the true source. The following year, History of the Future 2001 kept the door open, bringing bluegrass into a new era while preserving the full spirit of tradition. Each album carried the breath of freedom. Ricky had regained freedom in how he created, in how he played, in a mandolin no longer bound by the market. But Ricky didn't just perform pure bluegrass. He opened new doors for it. Between 2007 and 2013, he collaborated with artists from other musical worlds, most notably a project with Bruce Hornsby, proving that he could travel far while keeping Appalachia's air alive in every melody. The album, Salt of the Earth with the Whites, the family group of his wife, Sharon White won a Grammy with rustic hymns that felt warm as early morning sunlight. When they blended their voices, one truth became clear. Behind Ricky's celebrated career stood a home built on a peace fame could never provide. Then in 2009, Ricky released the album Songs My Dad Loved, a project he called A Diary in My Father's Voice. In every track, Ricky sang not with technique, but with longing for the man who first placed a mandolin in his hands. The album wasn't loud, wasn't heavily marketed, wasn't a race. It was a tender whisper of love for the one who built his dream. And as the 2010s arrived, Ricky proved once more that bluegrass could step into modern times without being traded away. Country hits. Bluegrass Style, 2011, transformed country hits into Appalachian versions, steeped in mountain spirit. Music to My Ears, 2012, carried bluegrass even farther through a collaboration with Barry Gibb, the last remaining man of the Bee Gees. It was a connection between two worlds that seemed impossible to meet. Yet side by side, they blended in a strangely perfect way, just like Ricky's life has always stood between tradition and invention. During these years, he also became a familiar face at the Grand Ole Opry, the stage where legendary artists set foot. And every time he stepped onto that stage, Ricky didn't play like a star. He played like a guardian, as if the whole of Appalachia were standing behind him, watching. Time moved on. But the stage lights never dimmed for Ricky. In 2018, he was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum and the Bluegrass Hall of Fame, writing his name into history as one of America's most important artists. It wasn't just an honor. It was a confirmation that returning to himself had been the best decision of his life. And in 2020, when he received the National Medal of Arts, Ricky stood there not as a winner, but as a storyteller, a man who had spent his entire life carrying the mandolin beyond the hills of his homeland, through years of market upheaval, through the glare of popification, only to return to the music he had loved since he was a boy standing in front of a Kentucky church. Today, Ricky Skaggs still stands on stage with Kentucky Thunder, his hair even whiter, his steps slower, but his playing still carrying the weight of a lifetime. A lifetime spent protecting sounds that are slowly being forgotten, a lifetime proving that some things, when played from the heart, will never become outdated. Beyond the days of performing, he lives with Sharon White in Nashville, in a house not far from the city center, yet quiet enough to hear leaves rustle every morning. There, Ricky makes time for the things his youth once had to sacrifice. Waking early to brew coffee for Sharon, sitting on the porch in the afternoons, listening to the wind and picking a few mandolin notes just to keep his hands loose, spending evenings together rewatching old performances and smiling at how far they have come. He tends the garden behind their home the way he tends his music, slowly, patiently, and with deep care. There are days when Ricky doesn't step onto any stage at all. He simply sits in the small studio at the end of the hallway, opens the window to let sunlight pour in, and practices old Bill Monroe tunes as if he were talking with an old friend. He says music now is no longer a race. It is a prayer, a breath, a way for him to keep his heart at peace. Sharon is still beside him, gentle as she was 40 years ago. They take walks around the neighborhood, attend their local church service, spend time with children and grandchildren, paths their hurried youth gave them too few chances to truly enjoy. And after the heart surgery in 2020, Ricky treasures those simple moments even more. He once said, "Every day I wake up with Sharon is a gift." Ricky's life today is not loud. There are no dazzling lights, no races to run. But in that quiet, he has found what he chased his whole life. A peaceful home, a heart that has been healed, and a faith that has never grown old. He hasn't left the stage. He has only learned to step down when he needs to. And in those calm, windless days, Ricky Skaggs lives exactly like a man who has written an entire life in music, humble, steady, and richly blessed. And then, looking back at the whole journey, from the little boy holding a mandolin in Kentucky, to the young man lost in a Nashville changing colors, to the husband who nearly lost his life on an operating table, And finally, to the silver-haired man still standing on stage beside the only wife of his life, we understand why the name Ricky Skaggs is not only a musical legend, but also a reminder of loyalty, faith, and a love that refuses to quit. If you see yourself somewhere in this story too, in the times you fell and stood back up, in a love that passed through trials and only grew stronger, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share this video. That is how you walk with us on the journey of continuing to tell life stories filled with music, filled with pain, but also filled with hope. Thank you for staying with us until this moment.